She arrived at the school every morning before the sun was fully awake. The air was crisp, and the quiet hallways smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. She carried her cleaning cart, pushing it slowly but steadily, making sure nothing was out of place. Each sweep of the broom, each swipe of the mop, felt familiar to her, almost comforting. It was her routine, the rhythm she knew best. The staff and students saw her, but not really. She moved through the halls like a shadow, noticed and often underestimated. Most people thought of her as just the janitor. Some even told her to stick to cleaning when she tried to make small talk or smile at them. It was never mean in a cruel way. It was more like they couldn't imagine someone in her position having any other talents or dreams. She learned to smile and nod, keeping her own thoughts to herself. Inside, though, her world was very different from the one others imagined. There was a fire in her, a passion that had nothing to do with mops and buckets. It had to do with music. She loved the piano. Ever since she was a little girl, she had been drawn to the keys, to the way her fingers could make sound, dance through the air. At home, she had a small keyboard, not very fancy, but enough for her to practice. Every evening, after finishing her cleaning duties and making sure her small apartment was in order, she would sit and play. She played softly, almost like she was sharing a secret with the world. Each note carried her dreams, her joys, and sometimes her sadness. At school, she had discovered a tiny room tucked away behind the library, a place that no one seemed to use. It had a dusty old piano, keys slightly worn and chipped, but it could still sing if played with care. She had slipped in there once, almost by accident, and the sound of the keys beneath her fingers made her heart leap. From that day, she made it her secret haven. She would come after hours, the halls empty and silent, and play her heart out, letting the music flow without fear or judgment. She knew the teachers and students wouldn't expect much from her. That was part of the reason she kept it hidden. People had already made up their minds. She was the quiet janitor, someone who swept floors and emptied trash cans. To them, her world was simple, her life small. But inside, she was building something beautiful, a talent that deserved to be seen, even if no one ever noticed it. Some days were harder than others. There were mornings when the halls were full of students rushing to class, teachers shouting instructions, and the cafeteria bustling with breakfast. She moved through it all, unseen, carrying out her duties, wiping tables, sweeping crumbs from the floor, smiling politely at passing faces. She had learned to become invisible, to fade into the background, and she did it well. But every time she walked past the music room and heard the laughter of students practicing, she felt a pang of longing. She wanted to join in, to let her music be heard, but fear held her back. What would they think if they knew? What if they laughed or dismissed her? Despite the doubts and the small comments, she never stopped dreaming. She remembered the first time she played a full song for herself, late at night, with no one around. It was a simple melody, but it felt like magic. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move freely, each note washing over her like sunlight. In that moment, she was not the janitor. She was a musician, a storyteller, someone who could make people feel without saying a single word. Her life outside school was quiet too. She didn't have many friends, partly because she worked long hours, and partly because she felt different, like she didn't belong anywhere. But music was her companion, her comfort, and her secret world. Every day she carried the memory of those moments into the halls of the school, letting it sustain her as she pushed her cart and wiped the tables. The ordinary tasks of cleaning became almost meditative, a time to think about the music she would play later, the pieces she wanted to master, the emotions she wanted to pour into every note. Sometimes, students would notice her in the hallways and offer a small nod or smile, but it was rare. Most teachers treated her with polite distance, occasionally reminding her that she had work to do. "Don't forget to clean the cafeteria before class," they would say, "or make sure the gym floor is dry after practice." She followed every instruction with care, never letting her mind wander in ways that might get her in trouble. She knew her place, at least according to the world around her, but in her mind, she was preparing for something much bigger. She often imagined what it would be like to perform in front of people, to let the music speak for her. Not just a few students in passing, but an audience that would listen, really listen, and feel what she felt. She dreamed of the moment when someone would look at her and realize that she was more than the role she had been given. She imagined the applause not for vanity, but for recognition that talent could come from anyone. From the most unexpected places, as the weeks went by, she continued her routine, never letting the outside world touch her secret passion. The cleaning cart moved steadily through the halls. The mop swirled through puddles of spilled water. The dust vanished under her careful hands, and yet her mind was always on the piano, on the music waiting for her when the last student left the building. It was a delicate balance, living in two worlds at once, one visible and ordinary, the other hidden and extraordinary. But it gave her hope. It gave her strength. There were moments when she doubted herself. She wondered if she was foolish to think she could ever be recognized. She was wasting her time dreaming of applause and admiration. But each time doubt crept in, she would sit at the piano in that tiny room behind the library and let her hands speak. The music reminded her that her dreams were real, even if the world hadn't noticed them yet. Each note was a promise to herself that she would not stop, that she would keep reaching for something more. One morning, as she was sweeping the cafeteria, a student dropped a notebook near her feet. She bent down to pick it up and handed it back with a polite smile. The student looked at her briefly, then said half-jokingly, "You should stick to cleaning, you know?" She smiled, the corners of her mouth twitching slightly, and nodded. Inside, her heart clenched, but only for a moment. She reminded herself that this was their perception, not the truth. She knew her own abilities, even if no one else did. The day continued in its usual rhythm. With classes, hallways full of chatter, and the occasional bell ringing and hurried announcements, she moved through it all, her secret burning quietly inside her. She waited for the moment when the halls would be empty, when she could slip into her little sanctuary behind the library and pour everything she had into the piano. That was her world, the one she belonged to. It's the one where she felt alive and complete. She paused briefly in front of the music room, peering through the glass. A few students were practicing scales, laughing and teasing one another. She smiled softly to herself and moved on, knowing it wasn't her place to join them yet. But one day, she promised silently, one day she would share her music with more than just empty halls. She would show them what they had underestimated. And when that day came, she knew the world would listen. Because music had a way of speaking the truth that words often could not. As the sun began to set, she finished her cleaning duties, making sure every floor was spotless, every desk wiped, and every corner neat. The school grew quiet, and the empty halls welcomed her as she made her way to her secret room. The old piano waited, dusty but eager, and she approached it like an old friend. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and let the first notes fill the air. The sound was warm, rich, and alive, carrying her hopes and dreams through the silent building. For the next hour, she played with all the emotion she had kept hidden during the day. Her music told stories of quiet strength, of dreams nurtured in silence, and of the longing to be seen for who she truly was. The notes danced and soared, filling the room with beauty and passion. And for that brief time, she was not the janitor who went unnoticed. She was a musician, a creator, and a force that could not be ignored. In that room, surrounded by empty walls and her own determination, she felt the first stirrings of a future that might finally recognize her for more than her role in cleaning. She felt alive, hopeful, and unstoppable, ready for the day when her music would shock the world in ways no one expected. The week started like any other. She pushed her cart through the hallways, nodding at the few students who glanced her way, all the while keeping her secret close to her heart. But that week, something unusual happened. The school had announced a talent show open to everyone, students, teachers, and even staff. Flyers were posted in every hallway, and the excitement buzzed like electricity through the air. She had seen flyers before, but this one made her stop in her tracks. A small voice in her heart whispered, "Could this be the moment? Could she finally share her music with the world?" Her first reaction was fear. She knew the teachers and students would never expect her to participate. They had already put her in a box, labeling her the janitor who cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. She had heard the whispers, the jokes, the passing comments telling her to stick to what she did best. But the flyer sparked something deep inside her. Maybe, just maybe, they were about to discover a side of her that no one had ever seen. She spent that evening pacing her small apartment, her mind swirling with thoughts. The keyboard in the corner beckoned to her, the worn keys seeming to call her name. She sat down and played quietly, testing her courage. The music was beautiful, fluid and alive. But the thought of performing in front of an audience made her stomach twist with nerves. Who would listen? Would they laugh? Could she really step out from the shadows and let them see who she truly was? The next day at school, she went about her cleaning duties with the usual care, but her mind kept drifting to the talent show. Students were talking about it, some excited, others dismissive. She overheard a group of students laughing about who would win, naming the piano prodigies, the singers with big voices, and the dancers who could captivate a crowd. She felt a pang of longing. They didn't know her, but she knew she could match them, maybe even surpass them, if only she dared. She found herself lingering near the music room more than usual, peeking through the window as students practiced. She had played in that room countless times when it was empty, but now it was alive with laughter and movement. A music teacher walked by, noticing her for the first time in a long while. He had always known she worked diligently as the janitor, but he had never really seen her. Today, he paused, watching her hesitation. "Would you like to play in the talent show?" he asked gently, surprising her. She froze, her hands gripping the mop handle tightly. I don't think anyone would take me seriously," she whispered, almost ashamed of the idea. He smiled. A kind and understanding smile. "Talent doesn't care about titles. If you can play, you should share it. I'd love to hear what you can do." His words were like a spark, igniting hope inside her. For the first time, someone was taking her seriously, not just as the janitor, but as a musician. She nodded slowly, a small smile breaking across her face. Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for. The moment when her secret would finally step into the light. That night, she went home with a mixture of excitement and fear. She sat at her keyboard, imagining the audience, the lights, the applause. Her hands shook slightly as she practiced, trying to picture herself performing in the school auditorium. Each note was a step closer to courage, each chord a promise that she could do this. Over the next few days, she secretly prepared, finding spare moments during lunch breaks and after school. She avoided drawing attention to herself, careful not to let anyone suspect what she was planning. She practiced diligently, refining the pieces she had mastered, experimenting with more complex melodies, and pushing herself to play with emotion and depth. Her small apartment became a stage, and her music filled the quiet corners, echoing with dreams and determination. She faced challenges along the way. The old piano at school was sometimes difficult to use, keys sticking or sounding off. At home, the keyboard had its limitations, yet she persevered. She reminded herself that the imperfections made her practice more authentic, preparing her for whatever awaited her in the auditorium. Each evening, as she played, she imagined herself stepping onto the stage, feeling the warmth of the lights and letting her music tell a story that words could not. One afternoon, as she was sweeping the hallway outside the music room, a student peeked around the door, curiosity written on their face. "Are you going to enter the talent show?" they asked. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I'm thinking about it," she said softly, hoping they would not press further. The student smiled, a small encouragement. "You should. I bet you'd be amazing," she nodded, grateful for the support even from someone who barely knew her. It was moments like these that helped her believe in herself. It reminded her she was more than the title others had given her. The whispers of doubt began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. The day of registration for the talent show arrived. She found herself standing in front of the sign-up sheet, her heart pounding. Her hand hovered over the pen as she wrestled with fear and excitement. She could imagine the reactions, the laughter, the disbelief. But she also imagined the joy of playing, the thrill of sharing her music with a room full of people. With a deep breath, she wrote her name, committing herself to a path that would change everything. Word spread quickly through the school. Some students were surprised, others skeptical. "The janitor is entering," they whispered. Some laughed quietly, assuming it would be a funny performance, nothing serious. But she didn't let their doubts reach her. She kept practicing, focusing on her music and the feeling it gave her. Her music teacher offered guidance, suggesting pieces that would highlight her skill and presence. He encouraged her to practice performing as well as playing, to imagine an audience, to connect with them through her music. She took his advice to heart, realizing that this wasn't just about playing notes, it was about telling a story. Sharing a piece of herself with everyone in the room, each practice session became more intense. She focused on expression, on dynamics, on the emotions that she wanted to convey. Her fingers danced across the keys with more confidence. Her body relaxed into the rhythm of the music, and her mind imagined the reaction of the audience. Every evening ended with a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that she was moving closer to something extraordinary. Even with her preparation, fear lingered. She imagined the audience laughing, teachers shaking their heads, students whispering. But alongside fear was excitement, a thrill that came from stepping outside her comfort zone. She reminded herself that this was her chance, perhaps her only chance, to show who she really was. She thought of all the times she had been underestimated, told to stick to her duties, and how wrong those assumptions had been. This was her moment to rewrite that story. Her secret world, once private and safe, was about to collide with the public one. She felt a mix of nerves and anticipation, but she knew she could not turn back. The talent show was no longer just an event. It was a doorway into a future where she could be recognized for more than her cleaning duties. It was a chance to step out of the shadows, to let her music shine, and to surprise everyone who had ever doubted her. The school continued its usual rhythm. Students chatting, teachers instructing, hallways bustling. She moved through it all with quiet determination, aware that each day brought her closer to the performance. She caught glimpses of students practicing, laughing, and sharing their talents, but she did not compare herself. She focused on her own preparation, understanding that her journey was unique and that her music carried her story. She began to imagine the day of the talent show, picturing herself walking onto the stage, the audience looking up, some curious, some skeptical. She could feel the lights on her face, the hush settling over the room, and the first notes flowing from her fingers. The thought made her heart race, but it also filled her with a strange sense of calm. She knew she was ready, or at least she would be, when the time came. Even as doubts whispered in her ear, she silenced them with the music that had always been her refuge. She knew that once she sat at the piano and played, everything else would fade away. Her title as janitor, the skepticism of others, the doubts and fears, they would all vanish when her music spoke for her. The week moved on, stay bringing her closer to the performance. She continued her work with care and dedication, but her mind was alive with notes and melodies. The talent show was no longer just an idea. It was a tangible reality, a stage she would step onto, and a story she would tell through her music. And deep down, she felt a thrill, a spark of excitement that made her days brighter, her steps lighter, and her dreams more alive than ever before. From the moment she signed up for the talent show, her world changed. She moved through her cleaning duties with the same care and dedication, but now her mind was alive with music. Every hallway she walked, every mop she pushed, every desk she wiped was accompanied by the imagined rhythm of a piano, notes dancing in her mind. She had committed herself, and there was no turning back. The fear that had gripped her initially had not disappeared, but it had been joined by determination and excitement, a powerful combination that pushed her forward. She began to use every spare moment to practice. During lunch breaks, she would find an empty classroom, the silence wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Her fingers moved across the keys, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, exploring the melodies she had prepared. She focused on precision, on emotion, on expression, knowing that this was more than just playing notes. It was about telling a story, sharing a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. At home, her apartment became her practice haven. The small keyboard in the corner, simple and unassuming, transformed under her fingers. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and phrasing. pushing herself to play more complex pieces, pieces that would capture attention and leave a mark on anyone who heard them. Some nights her fingers stumbled and she grew frustrated, but frustration was temporary. Her love for music was permanent, and each challenge was an opportunity to grow. She discovered a rhythm to her days that balanced work and practice. Cleaning became almost meditative, giving her time to think about her performance, to plan her approach, and to imagine the moment she would sit at the piano in the auditorium. The ordinary tasks she performed were no longer just chores. They were part of a preparation ritual, a way to center herself before she returned to the music. As the days went on, she began to notice small things. A janitor's life was often invisible, but she found herself more aware of the sounds and movements around her. The clatter of cafeteria trays became a rhythm, the whisper of pages turning in the library a melody. She began to hear music in everything, and it made her practice more intentional or inspired. She also encountered moments of doubt. Fear whispered that she would be laughed at, that the students would see her as nothing more than the janitor trying to be a performer. She thought of the teachers who had once told her to stick to cleaning, casual jokes, the glances that dismissed her entirely. The fear made her hands shake sometimes, her heart pound in her chest, but she learned to channel that fear into determination. Every note she played, every chord she struck, became a defiance of the assumptions others had made about her. Her music teacher continued to be her quiet supporter. He would occasionally stop by during her practice, offering gentle advice on fingering, timing, and expression. His encouragement was steady and kind, never pushing too hard, but always reminding her of her potential. "Your talent is remarkable," he said one afternoon as she played a difficult passage. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words were like sunlight breaking through clouds. Filling her with warmth and confidence, she began to imagine the performance more vividly. She pictured herself walking onto the stage, the lights bright but not blinding, the audience watching with curiosity. She could feel the hush as the first notes left her fingers, the tension in the room giving way to awe as the music spoke. She imagined the applause, the looks of surprise and admiration, the realization that she was more than anyone had expected. These mental rehearsals became a vital part of her preparation. Helping her to overcome nerves and focus on the music, there were practical challenges too. The piano at school was old, with sticky keys and a few that were slightly out of tune. She learned to adapt, to adjust her playing to make the instrument sing despite its flaws. At home, the keyboard lacked the depth and resonance of a real piano, but it allowed her to practice technical skills and refine her pieces. She realized that true preparation meant learning to work with what she had, turning limitations into strengths. Some students began to notice her more, though not yet fully aware of her talent. Whispers circulated about the janitor entering the talent show. Some thought it was a joke, others were curious. She overheard them while cleaning, smiling quietly to herself. Let them wonder, she thought. Let them be surprised. That moment would be hers. A moment where all assumptions would be shattered. She also began to take care of herself differently. The long hours of work and practice were tiring, but she made sure to rest, to eat well, and to stay focused. She knew that the performance would demand both physical and mental energy, and she was determined to be ready. She learned small breathing exercises to calm her nerves, practiced visualization techniques to imagine the perfect performance, and reminded herself daily that her music was worth sharing. Late at night, when the school was silent and empty, she returned to the small music room behind the library. The piano, though old, seemed to welcome her. She would sit for hours, fingers dancing across the keys, playing pieces she had mastered and exploring new compositions. Each session left her exhausted, yet exhilarated. Her heart full of the music and the promise of the upcoming performance. Her neighbors occasionally heard the music drifting from her apartment, soft yet passionate, carrying the emotion of her practice. Sometimes she caught herself smiling mid-play, feeling the joy of creation, the thrill of discovery, the power of expression. She was alone, but not lonely. The music was her companion, her confidant, and her guide. Despite the challenges, she remained committed to the path she had chosen. Every day, every practice session, every moment of doubt and triumph, brought her closer to the performance. She knew the journey was just as important as the destination, that the growth she experienced in preparation was shaping her as much as the actual event would. She began to notice changes in herself. Her posture became more confident, her movements more assured. The quiet determination she carried in the hallways now extended to other parts of her life. She walked taller, smiled more readily, and engaged more openly with the few people who offered kindness along the way. Music had not only transformed her talent, but had begun to transform her entire presence. There were nights when she worried that her efforts would be in vain. The fear of being ridiculed, of failing in front of the audience, lingered at the edges of her mind. Yet each time she sat at the piano and played, the fear diminished. The music reminded her of her strength, her skill, and the years she had spent nurturing her talent in secrecy. She realized that the real triumph was in the dedication, the courage to continue despite uncertainty. The closer the talent show came, the more focused she became. She refined every piece, polished every transition, and practiced the flow of her performance from start to finish. She imagined the audience, visualized the lights, and felt the energy of the room in her mind. These exercises were crucial, helping her to prepare not just technically, but emotionally. To convey the depth of her passion through every note, even her daily cleaning duties took on new significance. Each hallway she swept, each desk she wiped, each corner she polished was a part of her preparation, a time to reflect, to imagine, and to dream. The ordinary became extraordinary, and she moved through the school with a renewed sense of purpose. She was not just the janitor anymore. She was a musician preparing to step into the light, ready to share her story through music. Her music teacher occasionally stayed after school to listen to her play, offering guidance and encouragement. "You are ready," he said one afternoon, watching her fingers move fluidly across the keys. "Trust yourself. The audience will feel what you feel." His words reinforced her confidence, reminding her that the preparation she had undertaken was not in vain. She felt a sense of calm, a quiet readiness that had been absent in the early days of her decision to participate. She continued to imagine the performance, visualizing not just the technical aspects but the emotions she wanted to convey. She wanted the audience to feel her story, to understand the journey that had brought her to this moment. Each piece was carefully chosen, each note deliberate, reflecting the years of practice, dedication, and passion that had been her constant companions. As the final week of preparation approached, she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement unlike anything she had experienced before. She practiced with intensity, attention to detail, and emotional depth. She refined her posture, her expression, and her connection to the music, ensuring that every element of her performance would reflect her dedication and talent. Through it all, she remained humble, aware that the journey was ongoing and that there was always room to grow. But she also felt a quiet pride, a recognition of the progress she had made and the courage she had shown in stepping outside her comfort zone. She knew that the moment of performance would be a culmination of all her efforts, a chance to share her music and reveal the depth of her abilities. She continued to imagine the day, walking through every detail, feeling the lights, the audience, the anticipation, and the release as the first notes flowed from her fingers. Each mental rehearsal strengthened her resolve, prepared her emotionally, and deepened her connection to the music. She knew that when the day arrived, she would not only play, but also communicate the story of her journey, a story of perseverance, passion, and hidden talent waiting to be discovered. The day of the talent show arrived, and she felt a mixture of nerves, excitement, and anticipation unlike anything she had ever experienced. From the moment she woke up, her mind was alive with music. The melodies she had practiced running through her head like a soundtrack for the day. She went about her morning routine with a strange sense of purpose. The usual quiet focus she applied to cleaning now, replaced by a more urgent energy. Today, she would step out from the shadows and show everyone what she could do. At school, the hallways were buzzing with excitement. Students hurried to their classes while talking about who would perform and who would win. Teachers gave last-minute instructions, and the auditorium was slowly being prepared for the event. Decorations were hung, chairs arranged, and the stage polished until it shone under the bright lights. She moved through the familiar hallways, pushing her cleaning cart with precision, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the stage, the piano, and the moment she would finally sit down and let the music speak for her. The whispers began almost immediately. Students had heard that the janitor was performing, and they couldn't believe it. Some laughed quietly, thinking it was a joke. Others were curious, wondering if she could really play. She overheard fragments of conversations as she passed through the hallways. "Can you imagine her on stage? I didn't even know she could play. It's going to be so weird," she smiled quietly to herself. Let them wonder, she thought. Let them be surprised. They had no idea what was coming. Backstage, she took a deep breath and looked around. Students were adjusting their costumes, teachers were giving last-minute encouragement, and the energy in the room was electric. She felt small, almost invisible, but the familiar rhythm of her own heartbeat reminded her that she was ready. She had practiced for weeks, refined every piece, and imagined every detail of the performance. Now it was time to bring it to life. The music teacher who had encouraged her was nearby, giving a gentle nod and a reassuring smile. "You are ready," he whispered. "Trust yourself. Let the music do the talking." She nodded, drawing in a slow, steady breath, feeling the tension in her body ease just slightly. She had spent so long preparing for this moment, and now it was finally here. The audience began to settle into their seats, the chatter gradually fading as the first act was announced. She waited in the wings, her fingers lightly brushing the keys of the stage piano, feeling the cool surface beneath her touch. She imagined the audience, the lights, the hush that would fall over the room as she began to play. Her nerves were still there, but they were accompanied by a sense of excitement, a thrill that surged through her veins. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright and the auditorium seemed enormous. She could feel the eyes of hundreds of students and teachers on her, some curious, some skeptical, some unsure of what to expect. She walked to the piano with careful steps, her heart pounding, and took her seat. For a moment she paused, letting her hands rest on the keys, taking in the anticipation and the silence that had settled over the room. Then she began to play. The first notes flowed from her fingers, soft and deliberate, carrying emotion and depth that immediately captured the audience. The melody was beautiful, precise, and full of feeling. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her, each note telling a story of dedication, passion, and hidden talent. The room was silent, the audience entranced, unable to believe what they were hearing. The janitor they had overlooked, the woman they had assumed was ordinary, was creating magic with her music. As she continued, the complexity and skill of her performance became evident. The melodies rose and fell, filled with emotion and expression, each phrase more captivating than the last. Her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, precise and confident, conveying the story she had practiced for so long. The audience was spellbound, leaning forward in their seats, listening intently. Realizing that they had underestimated her completely, she felt a surge of confidence as she played. The fear that had once gripped her was now replaced by the power of her music. The ability to communicate and connect with every person in the room. She could see the expressions of surprise and admiration, the widening eyes and smiles of those who had doubted her. They were witnessing not just a performance, but a revelation, a moment that challenged their assumptions and expectations. The music swelled, building to a powerful climax, and then softened into a delicate, tender conclusion. She allowed the final notes to linger, feeling the emotion of the piece resonate through her entire being. When the last note faded, the auditorium remained silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was holding their breath, trying to comprehend what they had just experienced. Then the applause erupted, loud and sustained, filling the room with sound and energy. Students and teachers alike rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some even whistling in amazement. She sat at the piano, breathing deeply, her hands still poised above the keys. Feeling a mix of relief, pride, and joy, tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she looked out over the audience. She had done it. She had shared her music, her story, and her passion, and it had been received with awe and admiration. The skepticism, the whispers, the assumptions, they had all been shattered in that moment. She realized that her journey, her preparation, and her perseverance had led to this triumph, and it was more beautiful and meaningful than she had ever imagined. After her performance, students and teachers approached her, some still in disbelief. "That was incredible," one student said, eyes wide with admiration. "I had no idea you could play like that." Another teacher shook her hand, smiling warmly. "You have an amazing gift. Thank you for sharing it with us." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and fulfillment. The validation she had longed for was finally here, not as a fleeting compliment, but as recognition of her hard work and talent. Backstage. The music teacher who had supported her throughout the preparation gave her a proud nod. "You did it," he said simply. "You let the music speak for itself, and it was perfect." She smiled, the weight of weeks of preparation and anxiety lifting from her shoulders. She had faced her fears, embraced her passion, and emerged triumphant. The experience was transformative, not just in the eyes of the audience, but within herself as well. The rest of the talent show continued, but the memory of her performance lingered in the minds of everyone present. Students whispered to each other, still amazed by what they had witnessed. Teachers discussed her skill and presence, recognizing that talent can come from unexpected places. And she, sitting quietly after the applause, felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had changed the way people saw her, and perhaps the way they thought about possibility and potential. That night, as she returned home, she reflected on the day with a quiet sense of pride. She had stepped out of the shadows, faced her fears, and shared a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were not just for the music, but for the courage and determination that had made it possible. She realized that this moment was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. A life where her talent and passion could no longer be ignored. She placed her hands on her small keyboard at home, fingers moving over the keys with a sense of freedom and joy. The music flowed effortlessly, carrying the emotions of the day, the excitement, and the sense of achievement. She played long into the night, not for an audience, but for herself, celebrating the journey that had brought her to this point and dreaming of the possibilities that lay ahead. The talent show had been more than a performance. It had been a revelation. She had shown the school and herself that talent cannot be defined by roles, titles, or assumptions. It exists in quiet places, nurtured in secret, and when shared with courage, it can inspire and astonish. She had taken a risk, embraced her passion, and in doing so, had created a moment that would be remembered, a story that would encourage others to pursue their own hidden talents, no matter the odds. As she finally rested, her heart still humming with the music, she knew that the world had shifted slightly, that perceptions had changed, and that she had claimed her place not just as a janitor, but as a musician, a storyteller, and a force to be reckoned with. The applause would fade, the students would return to their routines, and the school would move on, but she carried with her the knowledge that she had achieved something extraordinary, a triumph of dedication, courage, and unspoken potential. After the talent show, life at the school changed in subtle and powerful ways. She returned to her usual cleaning duties, pushing her cart through the hallways, but everything felt different now. Students and teachers looked at her with newfound respect, some nodding or offering smiles as she passed by. The whispers that had once doubted her now spoke of admiration, surprise, and curiosity. She had stepped out of the shadows, and the world had taken notice. Yet she remained humble, quietly moving through the halls, aware that her journey had only just begun. The days following her performance were filled with unexpected recognition. Students who had barely spoken to her before stopped to compliment her, expressing awe at her skill and courage. "I didn't know you could play like that," one student said with genuine amazement. Teachers praised her dedication, acknowledging that talent could exist in the most overlooked corners of the school. She felt a mix of gratitude and humility, understanding that the applause was not just for the music she had played, but for the determination and heart that had made it possible. Her music teacher continued to be a steady source of support. He encouraged her to keep practicing, to consider more opportunities, and to believe in the potential that had always existed within her. "You've shown everyone what's possible," he said. "Now it's time to think about what comes next." His words were both comforting and challenging, reminding her that talent is not just about one performance, but about ongoing growth and exploration. Opportunities began to emerge naturally. Some teachers suggested that she'd perform at school assemblies or community events. Students asked if she could give lessons or lead music workshops. Each offer filled her with excitement and a sense of purpose she had never known before. She realized that sharing her music could inspire others, that her story of perseverance and hidden talent could resonate far beyond the walls of the school. Despite the recognition, she remained grounded. She continued her daily cleaning routines with the same care and diligence, understanding that her responsibilities and her passion for music could coexist. The ordinary tasks of sweeping, mopping, and organizing became part of a balanced life that included both service and artistry. She took pride in both, recognizing that each aspect contributed to the person she had become. Her relationship with students evolved as well. Those who had once overlooked her now sought her out, curious about her experiences and inspired by her courage. She shared small stories of her practice, her dedication, and the challenges she had overcome. Her words were met with interest and admiration, and she realized that her journey had become a source of encouragement for others who felt underestimated or overlooked in their own lives. Some students began to explore their own hidden talents. Motivated by her example, they signed up for clubs, tried new instruments, or pursued creative endeavors they had previously been too timid to attempt. She found joy in seeing their confidence grow. Understanding that her story had sparked a ripple effect that extended far beyond her own performance, she also found a deeper sense of self-awareness and confidence. The fear that had once held her back no longer dominated her thoughts. She had faced uncertainty, stepped into the unknown, and emerged successful. This experience reshaped her understanding of what she was capable of achieving, both in music and in life. She realized that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The school administration recognized her in a formal way, inviting her to perform at special events and acknowledging her contributions in newsletters and assemblies. She received letters of appreciation and encouragement from members of the community who had heard about her talent. Each note reinforced the idea that her efforts and her passion were not only valuable, but transformative. Her performance also strengthened bonds with colleagues who had previously viewed her as merely a staff member performing a job. Teachers who had once dismissed her now sought her insights and celebrated her creativity. She realized that her courage had changed the way people interacted with her, fostering respect and deeper human connections that had been absent before. With each passing week, she continued to hone her skills. She practiced diligently, exploring new pieces, experimenting with style and expression, and seeking ways to challenge herself. She took joy in the journey of learning and improvement, understanding that mastery was a lifelong pursuit. Her dedication became a source of inspiration for others who observed her. Commitment and resilience. The emotional impact of the talent show remained with her. She often reflected on the moment she sat at the piano, the hush in the auditorium, and the eventual applause that erupted. It had been more than a performance. It had been a statement, a revelation that defied assumptions and celebrated the power of hidden potential. She carried that memory as a reminder of what courage and dedication could achieve. She also found herself thinking about the small acts of kindness and encouragement she had received along the way. The music teacher who had believed in her, the student who had offered a simple word of support, the moments of quiet inspiration she found in empty halls, all of these had contributed to her success. She understood that achievement is rarely solitary, and that the support of others can transform opportunity into reality. Over time, she became a mentor and role model within the school. Students and even staff sought her advice on pursuing passions, overcoming fear, and embracing challenges. She shared her experiences openly, emphasizing the importance of practice, perseverance, and belief in oneself. Her story became a living lesson, demonstrating that dedication and courage can open doors that once seemed closed. She also learned to balance her new recognition with her sense of humility. She remained approachable, kind, and dedicated to her work, understanding that respect is earned, not just through talent, but through character and integrity. Her presence became a symbol of quiet strength, an example that one could be both skilled and humble, both ambitious and grounded.